Welcome to another edition of ParkTalk Podcast, the official podcast of the Naperville Park District.
The information presented in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult with your physician or a qualified healthcare professional to determine what is best for your individual health needs. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the ParkTalk Podcast. I am your host, Danny Ream. Community health and wellness is a fundamental staple for the Naperville Park District as seen in our year-round services and amenities provided. While it is important to keep your mind and body healthy, doing so in a safe manner is just as important as injury from exercising can lead to long-term issues. Joining me on the ParkTalk podcast to discuss safety in exercise and nutrition is one of our personal trainers from Fort Hill Fitness Center, Neil Deatrick. Neil, thank you very much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here today.
Yeah, of course. So to kind of start, a few of our Fort Hill personal trainers have been guests previously on the podcast, and each one has very different fitness journey, experience, things like that. So can you just start by sharing your fitness background and how you became a personal trainer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of it all stems back to when I was really young. I started doing Taekwondo at a very young age, around 6 years, and I did that growing up along with a couple other martial arts. I did soccer. I also did fencing when I was in high school too, so I was very active throughout my youth. And going into college, I definitely did a little bit of soul searching, but I believe a lot of that really stemmed in just far as what spurred me to pursuing my undergraduate, which is in kinesiology. I studied at the Michigan State University, and I have a bachelor's of science in kinesiology with a focus of fitness leadership, along with 2 minors, one of which is coaching psychology, as well as nutrition. Outside of that, I became a personal trainer almost immediately after graduating and have been pursuing it ever since. I had a brief stint in the medical industry, but now I'm back and I'm doing great work with all of my clients, and I'm really enjoying working with the podcast, or with the Park District.
This podcast is great work, though.
Oh, yes.
So lifting free weights and using machines is a very effective way to build strength. However, using these instruments improperly can lead to injury. So how can someone learn the correct form for free weights, machines like that, while they're working out on their own?
Absolutely. And that's a really good question. As far as building up fundamentals, I would always encourage people who are just kind of dipping their toes into weight training to start with what we would refer to as isokinematic stations, which is just a fancy way of saying cable stations. These are incredibly safe machines. They have a very fixed range of motion. You can't really deviate too much from the actual exercise that is intended for them. And it's fantastic for training specific muscle groups in that regard. So it takes a lot of the guesswork specifically out of the exercise, which is really, really nice. And there's quite a few over at the Fort Hill facility, which I really like to utilize with a lot of my clients just because it's really phenomenal for a lot of different ways. But once you've built up a good foundation with those sorts of stations, you have an understanding about what sort of mechanical motions you're trying to perform with those exercises. That's a good time where you can start branching off into free weight related exercises. So let's say I've been training on the cable chest press station. I have a good idea of exactly how my body should be moving through that motion. I understand what muscle groups I'm trying to stimulate at that time. Once I have that experience under my belt, now I can take that and transition it over to a free weight station. So what I'll probably suggest for those individuals who are making that jump, focus on reducing the weight for yourself, always focus on mastering technique. And then once you're really feeling confident and comfortable, that's a good time where you can start progressing from where you're currently at. But always baby steps. It's one of those things where, Rome wasn't built in a day. So it's always important to make sure that you're not trying to pace yourself based off of someone else, but always go off of how you're feeling with the motions.
Definitely. And you mentioned all the machines that are at Fort Hill. I've kind of noticed this at a lot of different fitness centers, but especially the ones at Fort Hill. They have QR codes that you can scan. I believe that you can you see how the exercise is done.
Absolutely.
On your phone.
Yeah, the QR codes, if I'm not mistaken, for each of those stations, if you utilize those, will take you to a specific website that will teach you how to specifically use that station. So it'll have a breakdown on what it's utilized for, what muscle groups you're training, and how you're supposed to use that machine, as well as how you're supposed to adjust it for your biomechanics too. So if you're 6'4", it'll explain, how to adjust for your height and, your limb length, versus if you're 4'8", it'll tell you how to adjust for your height as well as your limb length as well too.
That's great to know, because I never know what height to set all the machines at. So I'm going to have to check that out.
Well, talk to me after the show. I can tell you.
All right. So working out on a regular basis commonly can lead to soreness as our muscles recover and repair themselves. So what are, I guess, the best strategies for accelerating that recovery, or at least kind of minimizing the soreness? Absolutely.
And there's a couple different ways that we can approach the thought for recovery for ourselves. One of which is while we're doing our exercises ourselves. So during a training session or a workout, when I'm specifically focusing on training a muscle group, there's ways where I can make sure that I'm receiving enough recovery time before I'm proceeding to my next exercise. There's ways for us to incorporate what is referred to active recovery. So let's continue with that chest press example like I was talking about earlier. So I'm predominantly focusing on chest press for myself that day, and I want to continue doing some press-related motion. However, I want to make sure that I'm letting that chest relax for myself. So what's a good point for myself is to then progress to another exercise where I'm not going to be focusing on nearly as much intensity for myself, but I still can get that push-related motion while letting the chest relax. So I would suggest perhaps maybe, I believe a shoulder press would be a good example of this, where I'm still getting that push-based motion that I'm looking for, and I'm getting that shoulder stimulation in addition to the triceps, very much like I'm already getting with the chest press, but I'm still letting that chest relax since that's my main focus for the day. Now that's a good example of during the workout for itself. Now outside of a workout, one of the best things just flat out is making sure that we're resting properly. So make sure that you're staying up on top of your sleep. More and more research is coming out year after year talking about the importance of sleep. So make sure that you're staying up on top of it. Eating post-workout is always really important too. Making sure that you're getting enough calories in is going to be fantastic for your recovery as well. But on top of that, if you want some specific examples, while I was doing my undergraduate studies at Michigan State University, I talked with many registered dietitians who have plenty of recommendations, but one of the ones that I commonly heard from a lot of them was cherry juice. And really? Cherry juice in particular, just because it has a lot of anti-inflammatory properties to it. So something to just help with, if you have a lot of swelling or inflammation in a specific area that you trained the previous day and you want to make sure that you're using it sometime in the next couple of days, a little bit of cherry juice is going to be what helps get you there for yourself. But aside from that, just general rest and making sure that you're not overtraining is going to be the best recommendation that I have for that.
Yeah, I always see people online, personal trainers online, talk about how important rest days are. And, you should not go 7 days a week. You need to fit in days where you just don't go to the gym at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll say, and that's one of the things that a lot of people will overlook. One of the most important parts is that recognizing that a rest day is part of your training. It's not an off day, it's part of your training program. So make sure you take advantage of it, everyone.
Yeah, and occasionally, minor injuries do occur. I was training for a half marathon last year, and I had a minor calf muscle strain. Even though I was stretching, dieting, everything like that, it happens.
Yes.
But how can you prevent these types of injuries from occurring?
Yeah, there's plenty of ways for us to focus on preventative measures to make sure that these sorts of injuries aren't happening. Again, in a perfect world, stretching and all of these other precautionaries will do exactly what we're looking for. But every once in a while, the universe throws us a curveball. But first and foremost, I would always encourage everyone to pursue some level of a warm-up before you ever getting into your workout. Whether that's through a dynamic warm-up, a static warm-up, whatever feels best for your body, because again, everyone's bodies are just slightly different enough where something that works for me might not be exactly what works for you. And just depending on what you're training for as well, because I'm training something that you're training. So making sure that you're tackling that warm-up is always going to be a great way to make sure that we're increasing that internal body temperature, we're getting those limbs nice and warmed up for ourselves, and making sure that all those joints are working the way we want to. We're not going to receive any nasty surprises during our workout itself. Outside of that too, again, kind of coming back to that conversation about sleep. Sleep is such a huge thing. Making sure that you're staying up on top of it is going to be a great way to make sure that your body has enough time to do a lot of recovery process for itself. So with that too, just general quality of life things. Again, your body does a lot in your sleep, so stay up on top of that. And then last bit, nutrition is always going to be a really important thing too. Anyone who is very active all the time, you want to make sure you're getting all of your macros and a good amount of micros inside of your diet for yourself, because it's going to be important to not cut any of those out. Carbs are very important. Lipids are important. Proteins are important, but they're all important for various reasons for ourselves. So those are going to be a great way to make sure that you're also staying active for yourself and not letting your body falter in any way because you're properly fueling it.
Now, in case you are dealing with an injury, going back to, say, the calf muscle strain, what are some tips on treating it?
So as far as treating for a strain for itself, a lot of it will come down to specifically how you're responding to the recovery. I've known many people who can bounce back from an injury like that, but that was when I was a little younger. So generally, as far as things go, I would always encourage, resting, proper, first aid advice is always going to be good. We want to protect, rest, ice, and compress in that regard. So, making sure that we're not, in that regard, we'll stick with that same example with the calf. I'm not putting a lot of weight on that ankle during the recovery period. So if I'm standing for a long period of time, maybe I have something that I can lean up against to help alleviate some of that weight that's on that foot, or I can find a seat for myself. That way I'm not putting a lot of direct pressure on it at that time. Resting, again, just like we've talked about before, very important for ourselves. So again, if we have an injury at that time, make sure you're not training it. Always make sure that you're trying to follow proper procedures. Don't try and overtrain, don't fight through the pain. That's never good advice. And always, if you're really concerned about it, the best advice I've ever had, go seek a medical professional. If you're ever concerned about it, always go seek a medical professional.
Yeah, they know better than you do.
Exactly. While I know my body, they know medicine way more than I do.
Right.
So.
Kind of switching gears a little bit, exercising outdoors is very popular, especially here in Naperville, and thanks to the Park District, outdoor fitness programs. We have fitness stations at various parks, and then our extensive trails where people love to run, bike, and walk. However, exercising outdoors can also mean that you have to manage extreme temperatures. So what is your advice to people who choose to exercise outdoors regardless of the time of the year?
Yeah, and this is a really great question. It's one of those things where you really have to kind of understand the full bag, if you're really going to try and take full advantage of the outdoor weather. So right now, I'm teaching the outdoor grit class. It's over at the Fort Hill facility, and one of the things that I'm always trying to impress upon all of the students in my class is, making sure that we're staying up on our hydration. Hydration is going to be key for a lot of people, especially when we're outside in the heat for ourselves. Given that, it's one of those things where if you're already feeling thirsty, your body's already dehydrated, so it's good to be proactive about that. Make sure that you're taking sips. Don't just take a big swig of water and drink that down. Make sure that your body's receiving it in small quantities. Otherwise, it's just going to flush right through those kidneys for yourself. But one thing that a lot of people will overlook for themselves, especially for those who are doing more prolonged exercises, like they're going for a long run or a jog, things of that nature, or for a long walk, is that you're going to need to replenish those electrolytes, because especially through the sweating process, we lose a lot of those. So make sure you're staying up on top of it. If you're going out for a long period, make sure you have some sort of electrolyte packet, or you have it poured into some of your water just so you can help replenish those while you're outside. It's always going to be really important. If you feel like you're getting really hot, make sure you find some shade, get outside of the direct sunlight quickly, and then give yourself a break until you're feeling ready to move again. Those are going to be my best tips as far as for the extreme heat. Now with cold, that's a whole other bag of worms, but with that, make sure that you're bundling up. It's best from what I've heard. I don't personally do a lot of training in the cold, but from those who I've trained with, start cold and end warm. So don't fully dress to the nine in that regard. Don't have the full overcoat on with the sweatpants and everything. Make sure that you have just enough to be at a comfortable temperature at the start, and then as you're progressing through your workout, hopefully you don't feel like you're overheated by the time you're getting up to speed. And if you ever find yourself in a scenario where you're starting to sweat a lot, make sure that you get indoors, just because with those colder temperatures, that sweat will turn on you really quickly. Just a bit of outdoor survival advice right there.
Yeah, that's good advice. But yeah, I always see people, especially the time of we're recording this episode, it's been very hot in Naperville, and I still see so many people running outdoors in the middle of the day when it's the hottest.
I know.
And I'm like, how can you do that? I couldn't do that, and I love running.
They're all troopers. Say anyone who's out there who's doing jogging in this heat, my hat's off to you. You seem to have a good regimen going for yourself. Just pace yourself. Don't overdo it.
Right. So we've talked a lot about nutrition. The kitchen can be just as important as the gym. Because,
Absolutely.
Good nutrition is really the foundation of a healthy lifestyle. But with a variety of dieting options that people can find online or through any avenue, how do individuals find that right diet for them in a healthy way?
Absolutely. And this is going to come back around to touching on something that I've said a little bit earlier. So to get a little sciencey for our listeners here, especially when we're talking about nutrients, there's what we call macro and micronutrients. Our macros are consisting of our carbohydrates, our lipids or fats, and our proteins. These are going to be the three main that you hear from a lot of people whenever you're talking about nutrition most of the time. Outside of that, the micros, that consists of our vitamins, our minerals, and water. So all of these are very important for ourselves to make sure that we're getting this inside of our diet. Outside of specific medical conditions that require individuals to have some adjustments to their diet, I would always encourage everyone to get a little bit of everything in every meal that they have, because again, each one of those plays a very important role for ourselves. Carbs are our body's primary source of energy, is going to be really important for making sure we're staying active and energized throughout the day. We're not feeling super sluggish by the time we hit maybe 2 p.m. Protein is going to be really important for making sure that we're staying satiated. We're not constantly feeling like we have to eat for ourselves, but also at the same time, it's going to be really important for building up that muscle for ourselves, as well as helping with that recovery period too. So making sure we consume protein is really important. And then lipids in and of itself, very important. It's our most calorically dense macronutrient. It's 9 kcals per gram compared to 4 kcals, which is both for the carbohydrates and for the proteins. So with that, it's going to be very important for our body to utilize that as an energy source for ourselves. And one of the best things that I've heard recently inside the fitness industry that I think is really interesting, and I really kind of like it a lot, is that your macros will determine how you look and your micros will determine how you feel. So make sure that you balance those accordingly. If you're going really carb heavy, you're going to start to feel a little more bloated, especially depending on how your body handles gluten. Thank you. Oh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. For those who are a little more sensitive to gluten in their diet, whether you're gluten intolerant or you have a full aversion to it, that's a specific case point where we have to be very careful about what we're having with those carbohydrates, just because certain carbohydrates can cause that reaction for ourselves. But generally, we want to make sure we're having a good influx, just because, again, primary source of energy for ourselves. Protein, really important, but that's for a lot of our recovery and rebuilding, as well as making sure that we're not hungry all the time. And then the lipids are going to be great for just a natural energy source, and our body's going to utilize it for a lot of various and specific reasons for ourselves. The liver specifically is going to use that for a lot. Yeah.
Now, Neil, you've given a lot of really good advice, a lot of good information when it comes to exercising and nutrition. But for our last question, I just want to ask, what is your number one safety tip that you give your clients in regards to exercise and nutrition?
Yeah. This one is, I would say, probably a little more philosophical in nature, just because it's not a direct, do this and it will influence your life. But I think one of the biggest things that I see people in the gym do is that they'll often compare themselves to the people that they see at the gym as well. And, some people will get discouraged and they'll say, oh, I'm not training as hard as so-and-so. And I see this person, they look fantastic. And there's all these phenomenal number of variables and factors that go into how everyone trains and performs. And it's one of those things where it's really easy for people to get caught up in that level of psychology where you're comparing yourself to others, and that can strongly influence how you're performing. I know that there's several individuals who I've talked with in the past who have unfortunately injured themselves because, they weren't seeing the results they wanted, so they tried to push a little bit harder, which unfortunately led to them being injured, and then it only ended up being a setback for themselves. So whether it's in the kitchen or in the gym, one of the best things that I can always suggest is make sure that you're taking everything at your own pace. The way you train is going to be different than how I train and how someone else trains. So it's always important to think that, you're training for yourself. You're not training for this other person. So don't compare yourself to this other person. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to them. So make sure that you're staying focused for your goals and you're not getting sidetracked by what else you're seeing or who else you're seeing at the gym at that case too. Utilize those people, use them as inspiration, let them build you up, let them make you stronger.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, that everyone goes at their own pace and they have their own journey. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to see results, but it does take a lot of consistent work and good routine to get the results that you want.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. Well, whether it's participating in one of our programs, working with a personal trainer like yourself, or simply exercising with a friend, the Park District always encourages residents to find an exercise routine and a diet that works for them and that can be done safely so that it will lead to a healthier life. Neil, once again, thank you very much for sharing your tips and advice.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. If you're looking for more content, you can find all our episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or at napervilleparks.org/podcasts. Full-length videos can now be found on the Naperville Park District YouTube page. As always, be sure to stay up to date on everything going on with the Naperville Park District by following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or by visiting our website at napervilleparks.org.
Thank you for listening. The Naperville Park District's mission is to provide park and recreation experiences that promote healthy lives, healthy minds, and a healthy community. ParkTalk podcast is a production of the Naperville Park District.